I just want to take a step back and mention that I'm not a historian, because I think in the room full of historians, it's important to admit where we're coming from. I'm a sociologist, and I think by training, and now I work in policy and run a think tank. But some of the things I will say, I think, will have a bit of a different view. And if I misstate my historical narratives, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people to correct me. So I think Russia's invasion of Ukraine gives us an opportunity to assess and really think about not just the meaning of leadership, particularly assess US global leadership. You know, I think for the last 30 years, we've taken, at least 30 years, we've taken a break from history. But now that history is back, I think this is the moment that when the history books are written, 100, 500 years from now, if this earth still exists at that point, this will be the moment that we talk about as being the inflection point for when US global leadership thrived or US began its incremental but sure decline as the global leader. And I think this is the pivotal moment now where that future will be decided. And I think now is also an opportunity to assess. We've had now 16 months since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it's not a longitudinal view, it's not a long-term view, there's a lot we don't know. But I think we certainly can take assessment and a cross-sectional study, if you will, of how the US has done. And what is the status of US leadership in the world? How do we assess it? So, as I mentioned, I am a sociologist, so what I want to really do here is first outline 3 assessments, potential assessments that are out there in the public domain about how the US is doing. And then I want to think about, and together with all of you, about assigning a grade, and I know there's many professors in the room who probably relish the opportunity, to how we would grade US global leadership on Ukraine in particular. So if you are willing to be my focus group, I call this the Goldilocks of US global leadership, because there's 3 scenarios and 3 assessments. Number 1, one assessment says the US global leadership on Ukraine has been an extraordinary success, that the United States is back, right? Some evidence to convince you of that argument, and then I'm going to try to convince you of the complete opposite. 1, we've unified the transatlantic alliance and the broader Western alliance. As many here have said, over a year ago, if you had told us that the US would, for example, be even given Patriots or certainly F-16s, or that Germany would be giving Leopard tanks to Ukraine, you would have said absolutely not, that's unimaginable. But we are doing all of those things. We've seen massive tectonic shifts in Europe. Germany's Zeitenwende, Finland and Sweden, soon, of course, joining NATO, ending hundreds of years of neutrality. We have a re-energized NATO that has found, yet again, its core purpose and more, as Benedetta was saying. And we have a Ukraine that still stands. And not only does Ukraine stand, it is effectively and very capably and courageously deterring Russia in Europe and preventing a NATO-Russia conflict. Ukraine is also helping us diminish a huge US national security threat and a US adversary, enemy, competitor, whatever you want to call Russia. But Russia is certainly being deeply diminished as a result of Putin's folly in the invasion of Ukraine. And rather than falling in 2 days, Ukraine stands. And on top of that, we've done this very cheaply. Yes, we've committed a lot of money in absolute terms in the United States to supporting Ukraine, but we're diminishing a significant foe for very little. And that's a good deal. And so we can, if we want to focus on China, and maybe it's even making Beijing think twice about its intentions on Taiwan. So the US is back. The US is, once again, the anchor in Europe for the transatlantic alliance. Okay, that's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2, I would call fragility. And in fact, that the war has actually exposed a deep fragility in US global ability to lead. And here's the points for that argument. And I hope you're taking notes because I'm going to have a pop quiz at the end. So despite committing over $100 billion to Ukraine, Russia seems completely undeterred in its intentions to dominate Ukraine. And we haven't seen a dominant, clear victory, despite all of these commitments for Ukraine. And it looks like we're going to be in a very long, drawn-out war. In fact, rather than weakening Putin, Putin has been emboldened in Russia domestically. There's a recent poll just out a couple of days ago that showed that more Russians, 61% now, believe that the so-called special operation has been successful, and that is up from 53% just last November. 3/4 of the Russians now, and this is again an increase from before, support the war. 2/3 would even support a family member or close friend joining the war effort, and this is again an increase from before. So Putin seems like he's doing quite well domestically. That doesn't seem like a win to me. And most of the world doesn't support the Western policy, right? Look at the UN vote on condemning Russia's war against Ukraine. It's actually been a minority of countries who've even imposed sanctions if you look at it in absolute numbers. And the global South is either hedging its bets or it's trending pro-Russian. Lastly, sanctions haven't really worked. The Russian economy is going to, by many estimates, grow this year and the following year. Its financial management has been very effective and resilient. And so despite support for Ukraine, a general agreement among allies, we've also shown through very public arguments that there's a lot of division. And lastly, point of evidence to support the fragility argument is that even if the West looks more united in its support for Ukraine, the consequence of that has also been to produce a more united Russia and China alignment or even alliance. And that alignment or alliance is actually far more dangerous to the United States. So we've lost the ability to try to decouple Russia from China as a result of this war. And in fact, we made Russia dependent on China in a profound way. So that's the counter argument. And the last argument, which is what I call this the Goldilocks assessment, is that we got it just right. That even though we have tried to craft a policy that avoids two options, right? Two bad options. You can either have done nothing when Russia invaded Ukraine. That was an option. We could have done nothing. Or we could have done a lot more than what we're currently doing. We could have given Ukraine everything much faster, more rapidly, and maybe avoided a long, drawn-out war. And we've ended up somewhere in between, which, as Bob Kagan, who some of you know, I'm borrowing a little bit from him, and he is a historian, and that this actually is representative of how the US usually does things. We try to find a path somewhere in the middle between two things we're trying to avoid, I think, as Bob has said. So we have tried to avoid direct contestation between Russia and NATO, and we've tried to avoid nuclear war. But in the end, we've ended up with a very incremental approach and potentially have set us up for a very long and drawn-out forever war. But maybe that's just where we were going to be, and that's just the right policy. So we have three assessments. I'm not going to tell you where I stand, and I want to take a survey of the room. So now here's where I know if you actually listened. So all I'm going to ask is for you to raise your hand. So if your assessment is America is back, raise your hand. Your assessment of the US policy, extraordinary success. Okay, well, some people are coming in late. There we go. Okay, got that. If you think that the US policy has actually exposed fragility in US global leadership rather than strength, that's scenario number 2. Raise your hand. Okay. And 3, if you think actually we got it just right, raise your hand. Well, I think maybe that was Swedish, I didn't understand, but there we go. Okay, so based on this very scientific focus group assessment, most people think we got it just right, which I think is actually pretty interesting. And because this is just a snapshot in history, I do wonder what the response will be when we're back here next year. I'll have to repeat the survey. And I have one more question for you. How would you then grade, if you're a professor, US leadership on Ukraine? I know it's an unfair question. And we're not going to give failing grades because of grade inflation. We don't do that anymore in the United States. And forgive me, but in Sweden, you're on a 1 to 5 system. Am I right about that? No. Okay. Well, okay, who gives the United States a C? I think everyone knows what a C is. Raise your hand. Okay. Okay. How would you grade US leadership on Ukraine? A C, which is not very good. Raise your hand. Oh, okay, there we go, 2 people, great. A B, which is not bad.
Pluses and minuses count.
Not in my class. Or an A, which is excellent. Actually, I say the B's have it, but I'm surprised. Are you an A?
I'm an A.
Amazing. I never knew that about you, Frank. Okay. It is long. My own assessment, having followed this for some time, of course, has been that we could have done more, and we should have done more, and we probably would have had a different outcome. But given the kind of interest the US was trying to balance, I think historically we ended up in just the right place. But that doesn't mean that this policy is going to strengthen US global leadership in the long term. And in fact, it may weaken US global leadership in the long term. So I'm mindful of the time.
3 minutes.
Very good, I'm right on track. And I want to, after outlining these assessments, which are these arguments about what is actually happening, are playing out every single day on the front pages of the news and foreign affairs and all these other foreign policy outlets. And I think it will take several years, if not decades, for us to really understand, has this been the pivotal moment that marks the decline of US as a global power, or whether this is a moment that we're able to capture and actually for US global power not to decline but to thrive. So what are some of the lessons learned on leadership in terms of how the US has managed Russia's war in Ukraine? One obvious lesson is that without US leadership in Europe and NATO, we would have been in a very, very dangerous situation. And the US is the indispensable nation globally. I think there's been now no question about that to my mind. Also, there's no reason why the US can't do both, meaning address and be an anchor for the security of Europe and Ukraine, and at the same time, address China. Because I think the biggest mistake would be to see the Russia-China challenge as a binary choice, as unfortunately many analysts in Washington do. Because a global power must and can do both. Because what happens in Ukraine is deeply intertwined and interlocked with what happens in Taiwan. And I think we would be in a much more dangerous situation if, let's say, Russia and China decided to carry out their aggression against their respective intended victims at the same time. So we actually have an incredible opportunity here to permanently diminish the Russian threat and at the same time continue to focus our efforts on the security of the Indo-Pacific and Taiwan. Point number 2, on Europe. What have we learned about leadership in Europe? Well, of course, without the US, I think it's been clear that we would not have had a clear US policy towards, a clear European policy and a NATO policy towards Ukraine. And as the power balance in Europe shifts towards the east and the north, I think there's a real opportunity for, I would say, so-called smaller countries to lead. But leadership takes practice. And the more that the eastern flank and northern European countries, I think, make themselves heard, I think the big question is going to be who takes up that leadership mantle. because it doesn't seem like Germany is going to do so anytime soon. And I think the problem here is that as we're asking these countries to do more in the United States, as we're asking our European partners to do more, the problem is that European countries have never led before on defense and security. And one prime example is Poland. So Poland seems like a natural leader to emerge in Europe, but we've seen, I think, a lot of mistakes that the Poles have already done in terms of being able to take up that leadership mantle. And my last point on what we learn from leadership in a moment of crisis. Well, we learned that leadership is born in moments of crisis, and that's, I think, a very obvious thing to say. And I think Zelenskyy has shown that individual leadership can accomplish a great deal. And maybe it's time for the United States, if we want to retain our global leadership, to put our big boy pants back on and learn a thing or two from President Zelenskyy about how you continue to lead. And I'm going to stop there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your own assessment was that the US could have done more.
Right.
That could be either do what, but also when. Was that a missed opportunity of deterrence?
Yeah, I do think we had a missed opportunity. You know, in many ways, I think we forgot that leadership is hard, and it doesn't necessarily mean taking our allies' concerns into account. It means leading our allies. And I think we took a lot of time to rebuild the transatlantic trust that was so damaged by the previous administration that we forgot that we, unfortunately, still have to be the bully in the room.
Should this have started in 2014? Or
Yes.
maybe even earlier?
If you ask my assessment, 100%. We had a lost opportunity starting with the Maidan Revolution and the Revolution of Dignity in 2013, when Ukrainians died under EU flags for the first time, that we had people die for EU values under European flags. And that was a real missed opportunity. And it showed, again, that if the United States is absent, as I would say we were in that moment, then Europe doesn't lead.
Is there any discussion going on within the US leadership about this?
A missed opportunity?
Yeah.
Within the US leadership. Well, I think in my conversation to talk about leadership, all the concern, of course, in the administration and the US Congress now is how to maintain support. I would say there's little reflection, because reflection means you have time to reflect on what we could have, should have, would have done. And in fact, I'm not sure it's useful, because we can't change the past, and we have to focus on what we can do now to secure the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.